This is VOA Africa.
Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, June 24th, and this is Africa 54. Due to the global outbreak of COVID-19, Voice of America is taking every necessary precaution to safeguard its employees. So our broadcast will look a little different today and in the near future as we, out of an abundance of caution, reduce our staffing at VOA headquarters here in Washington. We're working to help keep you informed about what's going on, and we appreciate you staying with us on Africa 54. Vote counting is underway in Malawi Wednesday following Tuesday's court-ordered presidential election rerun. The Malawi Electoral Commission announced late Tuesday that both the ruling Democratic Progressive Party and main opposition Malawi Congress Party have lodged minor complaints about the vote. David Diallo reports.
Malawians voted in a rerun on Tuesday after their last election was ruled invalid, though reports of violence could threaten to discredit the poll. In February, the East African country's judiciary infuriated President Peter Mutharika by overturning his narrow election win, citing systematic and grave irregularities. Tuesday's vote is now seen by many as a test of the ability of the continent's courts to tackle voter fraud and restrain presidential power. But after casting his vote at a school in southern Malawi, Mutharika cast doubt on the credibility of the poll this time around, decrying violence in opposition strongholds and saying his party's Secretary-General had been beaten up. There was no independent confirmation of the alleged unrest, although the Electoral Commission said it had received reports of violence. Mutharika's disputed victory in May last year sparked months of anti-government protests, a rare sight in Malawi. He had appeared to have won by 3 percentage points over main opposition rival Lazarus Chakwera and by less than 10 over Deputy President Saulus Chilima. But this time Chilima has backed Chakwera, which would give them a majority if they can combine their previous votes. Around half of Malawi's predominantly farming population live in poverty. Outside a polling station in the capital Lilongwe, Elena Matanda says she's taking part for a second time because she wants her chosen candidate to seriously develop the country. Former law professor Mutharika has revamped roads and boosted electricity, while also taming inflation. But his critics accuse him of doing little to tackle corruption, something Chakwera has made a central pillar of his campaign.
That was David Doyle of Reuters reporting. One person was killed and 2 others were wounded after a suicide bomber blew himself up near the Turkey-Somalia Military Training Academy in Mogadishu on Tuesday, according to witnesses and officials. The bomber, strapped with a suicide vest, tried to join a line of cadets outside the training facility known as Turksom. Members of Somalia National Army guarding the facility opened fire after suspecting the bomber, but the man detonated his explosives. Officials say a civilian bystander was killed and 2 cadets were wounded. The al-Shabab terrorist group is claiming responsibility for the attack. The Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has also condemned the assault. Across the United States, protests against police brutality and racism keep happening and mostly remain peaceful. There are people of all races and religions in the crowd, including Asian Americans. For many of them, the death of George Floyd has been a self-described wake-up call. Sulia Yi produced this story, narrated by Kala Yu.
Maryland resident Ariane Ong says that she has watched the deaths of Black Americans for years now, but that the death of George Floyd was different.
I cared about it intensely. It was a catalyzing moment for me. There have been a string of Black deaths, but this was the death that tipped me over to shifting my focus from Asian American activism into the broader Black struggle.
I would also like to thank the Richard Montgomery High School staff.
Racism against Asians and Asian Americans went up when the COVID-19 pandemic hit the U.S. soil. Lily Chi, a Maryland state legislator, says that the Asian and Black communities are together in this fight against discrimination and prejudice.
I'm seeing more and more Chinese and Asian Americans waking up, realizing that you can, live in white neighborhoods, you can go to fancy schools and get fancy degrees and fancy jobs. All it takes is one virus for you to be reminded that you are not quite American as you thought you are, right? So this is a wake-up call. The pandemic is a wake-up call. This national outrage over George Floyd's death is a wake-up call.
At the protest called by local high school students in Rockville, Maryland, one of the organizers says they're happy that Asian Americans are coming out to show solidarity with Black Americans.
I've noticed from a lot of just people of color in general, especially my Asian friends, who have been truly touched by this movement and spoken out with me and said that they support it and that they're standing right with African Americans. I know that there's been a big camaraderie among Asian Americans, Chinese Americans, in Montgomery County especially. I've noticed that they're right there with us.
Black Lives Matter.
Even the Asian American protesters themselves are delighted by the turnout.
In the crowd, I've been very pleased to see a very diverse crowd, including several Asian Americans, particularly youth, but also I've been seeing adults as well. So that is very heartening, and I've also heard in the community there's been expressions of support and concern.
We also demand that
They also encourage new Asian immigrants to learn and participate.
When people wear glasses and masks, you can't really tell who's Asian or not, but I saw quite a few, and I was very impressed. As I said, as new communities and new Americans, it's our job to learn the history and the culture and the context and the struggles of this country.
Asian Americans have a difficult history of their own. Hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans were interned in camps during the World War II. Suli Wenhao Ma, narrated by Kelly Yu, VOA News, Maryland.
The police shooting of a Guinean immigrant triggered outrage in the United States 20 years ago. 4 police officers fired at Amadou Diallo dozens of times as he stood in front of his home in New York. Diallo was unarmed. The officers involved were acquitted at trial. VOA's Hedy Adams-Fitzpatrick spoke with Diallo's mother, who believes the recent George Floyd demonstrations could actually lead to change when the protests over her son's death did not.
21 years ago, February 4th, 1999, my life changed. My son, my firstborn, Amadou Diallo, was gunned down for no reason at night in his own vestibule. That moment, it was a shock. The 41 shots echoed around the world. It was a defining moment in history where all creed, all race, everyone came together, marching and demanding how come a human being be shot at 41 times. It was a very, very high-profile case.
Diallo says in New York, Amadou worked hard to save for college. She says it was painful to hear her son, who was educated, multilingual, and well-traveled, described in the media as just an immigrant street vendor.
Sitting in the courtroom, going through the process without giving the chance to even tell the jury who Amadou was as the mother was the most difficult and painful experience ever.
The police officers said they shot Amadou because he appeared to reach for a gun. Amadou had only a wallet in his pocket.
I will never forget sitting down and hearing that not guilty verdict. It was indescribable for me. It was difficult. But I remember just not looking at them. I couldn't do it. When I addressed the media, I asked for calm and prayers because there was overnight uproar. I just kept my head high and I told the people that I would be fighting for equality, for justice, for life.
Through a foundation named for her son, Diallo now teaches young people about his life and works to bridge the gap between young Africans on the continent and in the US.
I believe my son opened the door then, 21 years ago. because that was a conversation without any social media, but the media was really telling about this incident around the world. People were watching, protesting, reading about it. The difference today is because we have social media. This video that this young girl was able to record and offer to the world so that the world can see the way George Floyd was killed. Can you believe if we don't have that tape, we don't see that video, what would have been the story? This time, these young people who are locking hands and marching, protesting, and demanding, saying that Black Lives Matter. Even big corporations are not ignoring that today. They understand that we have to listen to the youth. We have to address this issue. We must find solutions, long-lasting solutions to solve this problem. Otherwise, I don't know where we go from here.
That was VOA's Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick speaking with Kadiatu Diallo. U.S. President Donald Trump was in the southwestern state of Arizona Tuesday to inspect the border wall with Mexico and deliver a campaign speech to highlight his achievements on immigration. Trump's administration is suspending certain temporary work visas for foreigners, saying it would ease the economic impact of the pandemic. VOA White House correspondent Patsy Widakuswara has our report.
President Donald Trump toured and signed a section of the wall in Yuma County, Arizona, to commemorate the 322 kilometers his administration says has been built along the southwest border.
This is the most powerful and comprehensive border wall structure anywhere in the world. It's got technology that nobody would even believe, between sensors and cameras and everything else.
The administration aims to build 725 kilometers by the end of this year. According to Customs and Border Patrol, the majority of the wall that has been built replaced existing barrier systems. Meanwhile, earlier this week, Trump signed an executive order suspending certain work visas, including H-1B visas for those in specialized fields like the technology sector, until the end of the year. The administration said the order will help Americans looking for a job during the pandemic, but it was slammed by tech companies including Amazon and Google, who need to bring in thousands of highly skilled foreign workers every year.
Some of those skills may not be easily duplicated by workers already here. I think there's a view that, sort of one tech worker is like another tech worker, but there's a lot of very specific skills, particularly in these sort of, bleeding edge technologies like artificial intelligence, which you just cannot, put an ad in the paper and there's going to be 20 people at your door who can do that job.
The order potentially affects hundreds of thousands of foreign workers, including most H-2B visas for non-agricultural seasonal workers and several other categories of people who are currently outside the United States without a visa.
J visas, which include au pairs, foreign exchange students, visiting scholars and researchers, and even foreign physicians, and also L visas, which are intra-company transfer visas for business executives, managers, and people with specialized knowledge.
Over the weekend, Trump's first rally since the pandemic in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was marked with lower than expected turnout. With his border visit, the president sought to re-energize his base by focusing on his tough stance on immigration, a key campaign promise.
It seems to be part of a broader economic philosophy and a political philosophy that immigration is bad for America, and to the extent that these Republican policymakers, including the president, think that's what their base wants, they're trying to give it to them.
The president ended his visit to Arizona with a campaign-style speech at a Students for Trump event.
But the radical left, they hate our history, they hate our values, and they hate everything we prize as Americans, and we're right. Because our country didn't grow great with them. It grew great with you and your thought process and your ideology.
While Arizona is traditionally considered a safe bet for Republican presidential candidates, it has become a battleground state where the outcome of the November election is unpredictable. Hatsibira Kuswara, VOA News, Washington.
We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the discussion on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our broadcast live on Facebook. Please watch and share our show with your friends. Also check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, the positive impact of COVID-19 on technological innovation. We'll be right back.
People, now you ready to ride?
Hello, I'm Amadou, your VOA health correspondent.
As you know, more than 2 months
During the COVID-19 pandemic, the World Health Organization says most people who get COVID-19 have mild or moderate symptoms and can recover with proper supportive care. If you have a cough, fever, and difficulty breathing, seek immediate medical care. If you have fever and live in an area with malaria or dengue, seek medical care immediately. For more information on COVID-19, visit who.int or contact your local or national health authorities.
Welcome back to Africa 54. The World Health Organization says the coronavirus pandemic is still growing, even as some countries start to ease lockdown restrictions. WHO Emergencies Chief Dr. Michael Ryan says the COVID-19 epidemic is now peaking or moving towards a peak in a number of large countries. Johns Hopkins University is counting more than 9 million cases and 474,000 deaths. Top U.S. infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci told a congressional panel Tuesday there will be more testing, not less, even after President Donald Trump asked health officials to slow down testing. Fauci also says he is cautiously optimistic a COVID-19 vaccine will be available as early as the end of 2020, but added that even if a vaccine is ready, there's no guarantee it will work or give any long-term protection. Now to Africa, where Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli says the country is planning to lift its nighttime coronavirus curfew starting Saturday. Restaurants and cafes will operate at 25% capacity and close at 10 p.m., while mosques will be open for daily praying, but not for weekly Friday prayers. Zambia's cabinet has approved a $439 million economic stimulus package financed through a COVID-19 bond in an effort to alleviate the pandemic's impact, according to the president's office. Zambia is reporting just over 1,400 confirmed infections and 18 deaths, according to Johns Hopkins. Top U.S. health officials told lawmakers Tuesday the nation's coronavirus response is improving, even as 26 states are now reporting a rise in the number of COVID-19 cases. Those numbers are increasingly the focus of a political debate after President Donald Trump said at a rally Saturday he had asked for slower coronavirus testing. VOA's congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson has a report from Capitol Hill.
New virus hotspots in California, Arizona, and Texas, even as other areas in the country like this barbershop in New York open back up. The president said he was serious when he told supporters he was slowing testing because it reveals more cases of the virus.
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world. We test better than anybody in the world. Our tests are the best in the world, and we have the most of them. By having more tests, we find more cases.
The White House later walked back those comments, and coronavirus task force expert Dr. Anthony Fauci told lawmakers that wasn't the case.
But to my knowledge, none of us have ever been told to slow down on testing. That just is a fact. In fact, we will be doing more testing.
Supported by other top U.S. officials.
No.
No, sir. No, Congressman.
Thank you.
But Democrats still have major concerns about the administration's response.
We're still falling far short of the 900,000 daily tests public health experts believe we need. We're also hampered by the administration's refusal to develop and implement a national testing and contact tracing strategy.
That strategy will bridge the gap until a vaccine can be developed. With the first vaccine trials starting next month, Fauci says he's cautiously optimistic.
We will be able to make them available to the American public, which would put us at the end of this calendar year and the beginning of 2021.
U.S. lawmakers also weighing ways of punishing China for its response to the virus, despite a U.S. law that prevents foreign nations from being sued in American courts.
And why would we take this unprecedented step? This is the third pandemic to come out of China. We also know that China failed to inform the world about the nature of the virus, that they restricted travel into China but allowed Chinese citizens to travel throughout the world. They knew it was human-to-human transmission, and they failed to adequately inform the WHO, in my view, and the world at large.
The U.S. currently leads the world in coronavirus infections, with more than 2.3 million cases to date and more than 120,000 deaths. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Washington.
In our tech report, engineers at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, are developing new technology for healthcare workers on the front lines of fighting the spread of COVID-19. As VOA's Ken Faribault reports from Chicago, an unexpected benefit of the current pandemic is technological innovation that could have a lasting impact.
On the sprawling campus of Northwestern University, down a long corridor in the school's Technological Institute, Josiah Hester is practicing safe social distancing in a mobile computing lab. He is part of a small engineering team developing technology to combat the COVID-19 pandemic.
Right now we're working on what we call smart PPE, so smart personal protective equipment. You can think of this as face masks with tiny sensors in them to detect all kinds of things from symptoms of COVID to fatigue to even does this mask fit on my face? Am I wearing it properly?
Hester's challenge is engineering the sensor to run without a battery and to reduce cost, while creating something that doesn't yet exist and mass producing it in months, not years.
Once we engineer enough where it could be deployed in a very large batch, the economies of scale would bring this way down. Because basically once we throw away this battery, which is one of the really hard parts to minimize cost at scale, it's just building a really tiny computer.
On the other side of the Technological Institute, biomedical engineering professor John Rogers isn't just leading a team innovating wearable sensors, he's manufacturing them right in his lab on Northwestern's campus.
And the devices that we develop, have physical form factors very similar to those of a Band-Aid. So we can really place them on any part of the anatomy. We're not constrained to the wrist. And I have one of the devices on right now. So it sits at the base of the neck, right, above the collarbone. And we initially developed this device to measure speech and swallowing activity in stroke survivors.
As concern over exposure mounted in the healthcare community, Rogers and his team adapted the device to meet the challenges of the moment.
Perhaps this system could be tailored to monitor the key respiratory symptoms associated with COVID-19, which are shortness of breath and coughing.
In under 3 weeks, his team modified the device and deployed them in 2 Chicago area medical facilities, where they collect data analyzed by machine learning algorithms geared towards monitoring COVID-19 symptoms. Rogers says demand for the device is growing.
We're in a number of different conversations with companies who want to deploy these devices on their employees so they can sort of track their employee health.
Which presents the next set of challenges, ramping up production.
But we also have spin-out companies that serve as a vehicle for sort of a broader commercially oriented deployment that allows us to hit levels of scale that we just can't support with philanthropy and foundations and federal research grants.
As he works to reduce the size of his PPE sensor, Josiah Hester is aware of the impact of his work on monitoring the virus and saving lives.
The scientific challenge and the scientific impact that you can have is definitely turning this into something that could be a moonshot. No matter what, we'll end up with a lot of science that could be helpful later on in kind of building these types of protective devices.
Devices which could further spin off new technology and applications that could have a lasting benefit beyond the healthcare sector, well after the COVID-19 pandemic ends. Kane Fairbaugh, VOA News, Chicago, Illinois.
An unknown disease threatens the clarity of Lake Baikal in Russia, considered the deepest lake in the world. Researchers began monitoring the situation half a decade ago, but they have not yet found what's making sponges sick. VOA's Arasha Rabasadi dives in.
Sickness spreads beneath the surface of Russia's Lake Baikal in southern Siberia. For 5 years and counting, scientists studied the source of a disease spreading throughout the sponge population at the bottom of the lake.
We monitor how many sponges there are in the sponge coverage of the bed. We see how many are diseased, collect samples, and analyze what makes them sick.
Olga Maikova is a researcher at the Limnological Institute's Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences. She studies what makes sponges sick and traces pathogens to the source.
We see that in places with higher human impact, the situation with diseased sponges is significantly worse. I already consider it a local ecological catastrophe because the diversity of sponges has been lost. Their numbers have fallen and everything there is covered in a layer of slime, dying organic matter. There is no chance for the ecosystem to recover in the near future.
Researchers say that even a relatively small sponge of 5 centimeters can filter as much as 20 liters of water. A lake bed full of sponges can help lessen the impact human visitors leave behind.
This place should be temporarily closed to tourists. Nature can heal itself quickly, but it needs time to be left alone for a while.
That may be a challenge. People want to experience Siberia's Lake Baikal. It is the world's largest freshwater lake and the deepest lake on Earth. It contains more than 20% of the world's unfrozen fresh water. Arash Arabasadi, VOA News, Washington.
And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.